Brilliant. I think that's us got everyone now. So we will kick off today's webinar, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Russell Overend, who is the Chief Operating Officer of MR CoilTech, one of the Clinical Innovation Zone residents and also one of the Living Lab partners. Today, we're going to focus on the journey MR CoilTech have taken to commercialisation, and I think it's safe to say that MR CoilTech have went in recent years just from strength to strength. And we're really excited today, Russell, to have you here to talk about your experiences, not just with MR CoilTech, but your journey before that in the MedTech sector and all those experiences that you have learned and brought to MR CoilTech in this collaboration with the Living Lab and our programme, and how that's led to the success and commercialisation for the company. So I think over to you, Russell, to maybe set the scene about your career and your journey and what's brought you to this point and to your role in MR CoilTech.
All right. Well, MR CoilTech is quite different to a lot of the companies that I've come across in my experience. Fair to say that every medical device company, every MedTech company is different. They've all got different challenges, different regulations and different funding requirements. So I kind of want to give an overview of some of that today if we can. But for me, before we get on to the MedTech stuff, I'm a physics graduate from University of Glasgow. I did want to do a PhD. Funding didn't come through in time for it, so I took a job with Pilkington at their R&D labs in Lancashire on optical products. So I worked in Lancashire for a couple of years, worked in Birmingham for a couple of years with Pilkington, then moved to Thales, the defence company, just across the road here. And worked there until the end of the first Gulf War, and then saw that there was a lot of cutbacks coming, so I then moved to Polaroid. Worked there for about 13 years. And through all these ones, it was all these companies that were always project-based. It was always new product developments, and whether that was ophthalmic contact lenses or glasses or coatings or defence products. Same with Polaroid, it was cost reduction or new product developments. And then eventually Polaroid went out of business at the end of 2006. And myself and a couple of colleagues, we did a management buyout from Polaroid and formed Wide Blue. And it's similar in a way to MR CoilTech in that we didn't use any external funding to get that company started. We kind of basically reinvested our redundancy money in the company to kind of get it started. And we grew the company over the last 15, 20 years since 2006 in line with demand. I eventually retired and got a call to come and help Shahjahan at MR CoilTech. So most of my experiences in MedTech have been with Wide Blue, and latterly joined MR CoilTech. So I wanted to give you an example, a load of examples, if that's all right, of the types of things we've worked on, because as I said, every project, every new product is different and it requires a slightly different approach. So
yeah, that would be brilliant. And from knowing a bit about your background, Russell, I think it'd be interesting for everyone watching at home today to understand that kind of breadth of experience you've got across that range of the MedTech sector, because it's really interesting setting the scene for how then you've come to the kind of conclusions that you've come to about routes into commercialisation.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think we started did our first MedTech devices in Wide Blue in about 2007. We worked on optical readers for DNA. We worked with Biopta, who you might know, I know you know as Reprocel now.
Yeah, one of the other companies collaborating with the Living Lab on one of our other programmes. So yeah, they're well known to us.
Good. Good to see they're still around. We achieved ISO 13485, which is a medical device quality management system accreditation in 2013. Probably not allowed to tell you the names of all the large client companies that we worked for across various classes of medical devices, but some I can talk about, Ferrecla, SKF, Antelope, who we recently did a sexually transmitted disease tester for. Small companies we've worked with, likes of Calcivis, an Edinburgh-based dental company, who recently got their FDA approval. Actual Analytics, who do kind of monitoring of rodents during clinical trials. Again, they've kind of been bubbling along and doing well now. Soft Cell Medical recently, pH monitoring of blood during surgery. Worked with a lot of university spin-outs from Glasgow, such as Anacale, Ouija, Medipix, Strathclyde, Peak Ophthalmoscope, Aberdeen, their whole body scanner, Cambridge and Oxford, a couple of quantum based products. Edinburgh, New Jersey was a facial recognition project. Also worked with, I always think of them as SHIL, the Scottish Health Innovations Limited, now called InnoScot. Worked with Elaine Gemmell for the first time, I think, in about 2008, I think, on the multifocal project there, and more recently with a pneumothorax monitoring device. Over the many years at Wide Blue, we've had direct involvement with, I think, 4 client companies. They found it useful to co-locate with the people that were doing the product development. So we've had Viopti, Waveblade, Sentio Biosciences, and PWB Health co-located with us at that time. And that gave me a real insight into the journey that these companies went through, and the pains and the risks and the stress of it all, not just on the development side, but on the funding, commercialization, regulatory route to market, etc. So that was interesting.
Sounds like over the lifetime that you were at Wide Blue, that covers so many different areas, so many intricacies of that medtech development, overcoming challenges, so the ISO accreditation and understanding all the regulations there. It's a really wide portfolio of what you've been delivering, and not just being based in Scotland and that far reach across different areas in Scotland, but then also across the UK and further afield. So from that experience, what were the key learnings that you took from that? Because you must go from project to project and get a little bit of understanding from one and then implement something a little bit different in the next one. So what was your kind of key understandings from that you've built up and developed?
Yeah, well, basically, as I said earlier, every project's different and every management team is different. And we say that the kind of key to a good company is to have a good management team and good employees. It's kind of part of the story, but there's a load of hard work and risk-taking and kind of pragmatic approach to things that all contribute to the success or failure. Because a lot of these companies that are just listed there are not around anymore because they ran out of money, they made the wrong decisions, stuff happens, and it's a kind of high-risk game. So which is why it attracts a lot of external investment, rightly or wrongly. So but just to finish off my story, we did work on lots of Innovate UK or SBRI competition awards at Wide Blue, and I'm a kind of big fan of Innovate UK or SBRI funding, because to get the funding, it has to be a credible idea. It's a competitive bid situation where your proposal is evaluated against everyone else's proposal, and typically it's like a 5 or 10% success rate. So if you can get an Innovate UK project or SBRI project awarded, then it's a big boost to the credibility of that product or that service that you're looking to deliver. And that sits well with potential investors, it sits well with customers, it sits well with staff as well. So, and that's where I first came across MR CoilTech, in that we were the design and development partner for the mechanical design of the NeuroCam 7T product for them. And that's where we worked with Shahjan. here at the Clinical Innovation Zone. Yeah.
Yes, it's an absolutely fantastic story of kind of how that kind of career has led you here, and nice to know that you thought about retirement and then decided wasn't quite right and have come back, and I think that's
I think I lasted 6 months before I got a call from Shahjan, and he's a nice guy to work with, and good technology, sound business plan. So yeah, he tempted me back. Yeah,
and the gain of everyone, because it's been an asset having you as a kind of partner in the Living Lab as well. So we're not going to complain that you decided to come out of retirement either.
Okay. All right. So these are my personal observations on MedTech products. Not so much MR CoilTech, but on other projects that we've worked with over the last kind of 15, 20 years or so. So the typical model that's touted is that you've got a project that you start up. It could be a spin out from a university, or someone with an idea, or a project within an existing company. You maybe get some grant funding, or you work for nothing and do it as a spare time activity. And then you would seek some early stage funding, be it seed funding or angel investors perhaps. And then as you kind of get further into it, you would typically move into VC funding or Series A funding. And then all your shareholders eventually are going to look for an exit, so you then have to sell. A lot of the companies, or vast majority of the companies that I've worked with in the past, will go down that route. And as I said earlier, there's a high risk of failure. Lots of reasons for failure. You've got the kind of valley of death when you're waiting to see if you get funding, but a lot of companies fail. Even the ones that get their funding may still run out of money at the end of it, and that means that either it's closed, it's bankrupt, or it's sold on to someone else. So yeah, it's a high risk business to go into MedTech commercialisation. It's typically a longer time to market than most people expect. I mentioned Calcivis earlier. It's 12 years ago, I think, that White Blue started to develop their product for them. And it was just last year, I think, that they got their FDA funding. And thankfully, they're doing well. But 12 years is not unusual for getting a product onto the market. So that's a long time. And even if you get a product onto the market, it's slow to gain acceptance. One of the Innovate UK projects we worked on, which I think was also about 12 or 13 years ago, was a Cambridge company called Tidal Sense, which is a handheld portable capnometer. So we developed their product about 10 years ago. And then they ran some clinical trials. The clinical trial results were great. I think about 7 years ago, the results were reported. About 5 years ago, they got the CE mark, and they're gradually scaling it up. So that should be a groundbreaking, world-beating product, but it takes time to convince all the clinicians to start to use it. So it's, the scale-up times for a lot of new medtech devices are kind of held back by the medical profession in some cases, because it's not just our government or that you've got to convince it's every single GP or surgeon or every single user. So it's generally a big task to scale these things up, and that makes the technical side of it a lot of hard work, the clinical side, but also the financial, and then all the staff stuff, the recruitment and training, the regulatory, the legals, the salespeople, and then staff retention through all that uncertainty as well. So the final thing is to do with the kind of fundraising of it. Is if you are forced to take angel or VC funding, then there's always a start-stop. You've got to stop when you're about to run out of money. You've got to then try and get extra funding to allow you to keep going. So everything goes on hold. And there's all this uncertainty about will you get funding? And then the same happens later on if you've got multi-stage funding as well. Because you're looking at a lot of these projects over the longer term, then a lot of worldwide priorities can change, or you get new entrants to the market. So it's just, yeah, a big deal, a lot to deal with. You've got extra costs for the legal fees of doing all your VC and angel investment funding. You've usually got an investment director to pay. You'll have demands or restrictions that are put in place by the board that restrict recruitment and spend profiles, and they'll all have their views. Yeah. So there's a load of challenges that I think over the years I've seen that the companies have.
Yeah.
And it's quite refreshing for me in MR CoilTech that it's a wee bit different to that.
Yeah. So I think what is exciting and what we're going to explore next is some of the different models that can help to, I suppose the best way to put it would be to avoid some of those risks. But what we have talked about is that's not always going to be an option for every medtech startup and company. And what I actually find quite reassuring about what you're saying is, yes, this is a hard journey, but we do have more medtech coming through. And medtech's where we are going to get some of our advances for patients and the NHS.
Yeah.
But what I can see is a lot of the ecosystems that the university, the Living Lab programme and the Clinical Innovation Zone are putting in place are going to help to try and address some of these risks and help us to de-escalate some of them as well. So while we're not going to focus on, I suppose, those routes today, it's good to know that there are paths being investigated when this path is the right path to take. But what we really want to unpick today is what is the slightly different route that MR CoilTech have been able to utilise through some of your experience, like we've just said, with Wide Blue and other companies that have helped to, yes, maybe sidestep some of these risks that that we've just seen and heard about.
Okay, I'm not sure that everyone knows about MR CoilTech, so do you want me to?
Yeah, it'd be great to just to set the scene for everyone on the call.
5-minute introduction to that. So at the moment we're a small company of 7 employees. We're based here in the ICE building, the Imaging Centre of Excellence building at the University of Glasgow. So we rent space here, we rent service space here, which is part of the big deal for us because we were talking earlier, when I worked at Wide Blue, we rented space, we paid council tax, we had a electricity bill, a gas bill, we had to service the fire extinguishers, do all the risk assessments, all the infrastructure that's required with a company, all the security stuff even, or mice and rat traps, provision of kitchens, servicing the elevator,
things that you don't think you would be encountering when you're going to start up a medtech company.
Medtech
traps.
Company, you shouldn't be putting cheese in your mouse traps every week. Yeah. So, not that we did, but I arranged a contractor for that, but I'm exaggerating for effect. But anyway, the point is that the Clinical Innovation Zones made it easy for us to get started here, and that a lot of that infrastructure is already here. There's even a 7 Tesla scanner in the basement, which on the ground floor that we get use of, which is a real benefit to us. None of our competitors have immediate access to that kind of facility. So that counts for a lot for us. So who are we? So we're a group of 7 staff. We make head coils for the world's most powerful MRI scanners. They are the 7 Tesla scanners, which are big beasts. There's 3 manufacturers of 7T scanners, being GE, Siemens, and Philips. There's a Siemens scanner in the ground floor here, and we make the head coils that are used in conjunction with that. How do I?
That one there.
All right. So the thing on the left is the inside of a head coil. It's got loads of electronics, mechanical parts. It's RF, radio frequency electronics. So it's a bit of a specialist build, specialist design. But the benefits of that is that by getting all these sensors effectively really close to the brain, you get a lot more detail, you get a lot better resolution of the image quality of the structure of the brain. So they're used in MRI suites, like the one on the right there, and they produce some of the highest resolutions of brain images that would be found, and that's why researchers use them. So our customers are all researchers. You know, you think, well, that's a small market. Well, it's not actually. There's 110 of these types of scanners in the world, and some of the researchers have got multiple head coils that they'll use as part of their work, depending on what they're doing. So that's an immediate market size of, you know, a good couple of hundred potential head coils for us. So far, I think we've sold 10, so we're only getting started at the moment. So the company was kind of set up by Shahjan when he came to the UK. He previously worked in MRI head coil design and manufacture in India and Germany. He got a position here at Glasgow Uni as head of MRI RF engineering, and basically he started to design head coils and switches and various accessories in his spare time. And that's kind of where he started as a one-man band, you know, doing some stuff at home.
Yeah. Was that collaborative? Because I noticed the School of Psychology and Neuroscience, was it a kind of want of his colleagues for better resolution, or was it interest in the kind of more engineering side to see what he could enhance based on that technology?
I think it just demand from different customers or different groups throughout the world. He was very well regarded in his field. And he would get requests for, could you do this or that? And if it wasn't in scope at the uni, he'd do it at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I know he did some stuff for Glasgow Uni, and we did stuff for Berkeley. I'm not sure who that was before my time, so I had to ask him. So for him, it kind of started seriously in 2020. When COVID struck, all the university researchers and lecturers were all sent home, all the students were sent home. For most, it was a really hard time. Yeah. For those of us working in healthcare, if it was relevant, then it was a really busy time. And yeah, I'm sure you remember that.
I was doing some COVID clinical trials at that time. So I do remember it being a very busy and intense time, and a time that we kind of pushed forward with a lot of science and research to try and answer some of those important questions.
Same at Wide Blue, we had projects that were just paused or stopped immediately, but they were more than offset with other projects that were accelerated or new ones that came along trying to find COVID applications. So, yeah. So,
well, it was a time of uncertainty, I suppose, for a lot of people and for a lot of researchers, because if the research wasn't COVID focused, like you say, a lot of people did have to down tools because of the regulations imposed, and quite rightly so, to try and keep everyone safe. But it seems that there was an opportunity here that we were able to capitalise on for a little bit of development with the kind of coil technology. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I know that I think that's when we first started working with Shahjan, was on the design of a head coil. The first head coil I think he did for University of California, Berkeley. So we were involved at Wide Blue in the design of that. The mechanical design of that, he did the electronics and the RF side of things. And I think they had a COVID angle to it at Berkeley, and you know that was an urgent operational requirement, as they used to call it in the military. And Shahjan got dispensation to travel to the US. You know, he was one of the very few people on the flights. He checked into a hotel that was almost deserted. You know, had to get hot food delivered to his room because all the restaurants were closed. He only saw, you know, the inside of a lab, wearing face masks, and did the work to install this head coil at California, and then came home without speaking to anyone. So, you know, it was very different time then.
Yeah.
But ultimately it was successful and it got him established in that area.
And I think we were chatting about this earlier. Out of all of that uncertainty and all of the negative consequences of COVID, that some of the research advances that we did get, so a requirement for the development of that type of coil and that type of work, is one of the positives that we can take from that we were actually able to push on that technology that hopefully benefited not just the COVID research, but then also that research environment going forward. And I think that's important because there was just so much kind of sadness around about that time that we can pull some of those kind of research gains from that and actually now utilise them in other ways as well. Yeah,
a lot of advances made at that time in areas that were relevant, and unfortunately the other areas were held up at the time.
Yeah, so COVID in a way for MR CoilTech, I suppose, was the start of that journey in terms of external orders and
yeah, that's where it started journey, for MR CoilTech. Kind of got us into the kind of a bigger league, shall we say?
Yeah.
And then kind of moved on from there, and kind of moved on then to a couple of Innovate UK funded projects, kind of based on that case study. I suppose that helps show the credibility to Innovate UK. I can't remember which one came first, whether the Living Lab got their funding that included the development of MRI head coils, or we also got a project to develop a clinical neuroimaging head coil that was as a collaborative project. So I know they both started about 2021, and they brought on these head coils to a kind of much better usable standard. And we side note here, very pleased to have received the Innovative Collaboration Award at the Life Sciences Award on Thursday night last week. So that was a late addition to this slide, was the photo on the right there.
Wanted to say congratulations, but I knew you had that, so I didn't want to steal your thunder, but that was
congratulating myself.
Absolutely fantastic achievement though, and
it was good work. It was a collaboration between White Blue, who I was working for at the time, MR CoilTech, University of Glasgow, who did all the modelling and the kind of safety side of things, and the NHS, who also did some safety stuff, and the clinical effectiveness and clinical trials on it. So that was rewarded last week.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely brilliant. So I suppose we've now got to the point where we've gone from an academic concept to the kickstarting of that business model. And this is actually, like you say, where the Living Lab collaboration came into play, which is great for the commercialisation. It was also the transition of MR CoilTech into the clinical innovation zone and using that ecosystem. So this was, those next steps to see how you were going to push forward and take that technology into the kind of more business sector and how it was going to be produced and marketed.
That's right. And for us, we already had made some sales, and the earnings from that were then kind of reinvested in the Innovate UK projects, because as an SME, then the Innovate UK projects cover 70% of the cost. So we had then the funding to plug the gap and fund that other 30% of the costs. And with that funding, we took, slide on the left is the Glasgow head coil. We kind of judged that to be about TRL, that's the technology readiness level 5 on a scale of 1 to 9. At the time we started, to TRL level 7 during the Living Lab and Innovate UK project. And we're now going to take that on to TRL level 9 this year, with CE marking the product on the right later this year.
So just for some of us, and myself included, let's just unpack that a little bit more. So we're talking about, you're saying you were able to make products at this time, you had sales orders, and we're talking about technology readiness levels at different states. Can you talk us through the kind of differences between the product at TRL 5 through to your later TRLs and then the CE marking, just to get a feel for that kind of range of products that you're able to produce?
Sure. TRL level 5 is like a a feasibility demonstrator that shows that it can work. It may not have all the bells and whistles. You know, it's done for PhD researchers who will generate the data in support of their PhD typically. It may not be the most ergonomic. The one on the left, you can see you've got to climb into it, rather than the one on the right. You can see all the sliding mechanisms. It just has to operate a couple of times to generate the data for a PhD. Although that one I think did really well. So at that stage, usually it doesn't have to be that reliable, whereas obviously when you get to a CE marked medical device, TRL levels 7, 8, 9, then they have to be safe, reliable, effective, etc. Yeah. So TRL level 7 is where it's more patient friendly, it's ergonomic, and the data coming out of it is reliable, consistent, etc. And you know, that's the standard. Well, that's where we are at the moment, and you know, we're scaling that up into TRL level 9, where you're making it designed for manufacture. So you're making it easier, faster, cheaper to manufacture, and you're meeting all the CE or FDA approval requirements of it as well.
Yeah, and I think that just ties back nicely to what you were saying is your market started out as a very academic market, which these TLRs are perfectly applicable for, but then you've then given yourself the ability to scale up and move into that CE marked market, which is hopefully going to be an up and coming market for the 7T, right, as well as we progress into the future, which isn't a big market just now, because just if anyone on the webinar is not aware, 7T is not used clinically just now. That's but right. The hope would be that one day eventually
not that far away.
So it's just interesting to see. Again, I think we'll talk a bit more about this later, but just that kind of that pipeline of products and how actually that has worked really well into this type of model for commercialisation. So we can pick back up on that.
And it's fair to say that MR CoilTech, we license the IP from the coil on the left, and we use that IP in the coil on the right. So there's a royalty payment that goes back to the University of Glasgow, which is then distributed for every one that we make. So it's in everyone's interest that we succeed there.
Just while we're at this point, just want to encourage anyone, if you do have any questions, please feel free to pop them into the chat and we can come round to them at the end of our discussion. Just if anything pops into anyone's head, please feel free to pop it in there. And I think moving on from this, it would be really interesting then to see, you know, what the product actually produces in terms of output, because we're looking at this being like, that looks like a really nice bit of
picture,
bit of kit, but what does that actually mean in real terms?
Oh, well, it makes images of the brain, and I'm not an MRI physicist, but I don't know how many of the audience are, but even I can understand this one here, so I can't even see the mouse. Here we are. What we're measuring here, and this slide I think was produced by one of our customers, and Nova. They're the kind of industry standard head coil manufacturer at the moment, and what we're looking at here is the signal to noise ratio. Basically, the bigger the better. The more signal, the less noise you've got, the better. And so red is good, and blue is not so good. So our product, which we're calling the NeuroCam 7T, has got way more red, particularly around the edges, than our competitor. So even I can understand that one. Hopefully everyone can as well. And you know, partly because of that, we've got a growing order book. First one we did was a Berkeley one that we've done during COVID. We've done others for Berkeley. We've done these are all 7 Tesla scanners at various university research establishments. So I think we've done about 9 so far. We've got another one almost completed upstairs, ready to ship next week to Berkeley. We've got another one again to do for Berkeley, one for National Institute of Healthcare That's the US government, an order from them. Liège, there's that in Belgium. The one for New York University is interesting. That will be our first 3T, our first 3 Tesla scanner. So it sounds like a step backwards, but it's a new generation of high power 3T scanner. So yeah, we kind of that should open a few more doors to us if we can get some great results from that one, as we expect as well.
And I think that's what we were chatting about, that technology readiness level. So a lot of these are academic commissions, but going into the 3T, even though you're coming down a kind of magnitude in terms of the MRI technology, but it's the clinical standards. So actually that opens the door to the clinical market, especially with that pipeline into the CE marking. So actually that's
so we kind of need
exciting.
to have the CE mark and the FDA approval by the time that the 7T scanners make it into main day-to-day use. So I think that's total is about 7 there. We've got 2 others that we need to make. One for in-house for the first neurovascular coil at TRL level 7, 8, 9, whatever we can do there, and one for the university, another one for the University of Glasgow as well. We've got further forecasts and potential orders for the years ahead, and the outlook for us is for more growth, particularly once we get CE or FDA approval, which then for us means more staff, more space. We have been successful in collaborations. We'll continue doing that, and throughout that, we've not required any external funding, for which we're very proud.
So looking at it just now, you've got beautiful evidence, and I'm a pharmacologist / molecular biologist by trade, so imaging and especially MR physics is not my strong point, but even I can see from that evidence generated, and beautiful to see. So it's great that you're on site. You've mentioned that with Clinical Innovation Zone, there's a 7 Tesla. You guys can create your own evidence, but the fact that that was generated by a client and wasn't in-house generated just adds that extra strength to...
I think that's published in Nature Methods, I think.
The advantage of the NeuroCam over that kind of industry standard there, it's clear. And like I say, even I can see that. You've got your prototypes and you've got that growing order book. But I think the bit that will have piqued quite a lot of interest is, so you have a growing company, you're chatting about expansion, especially as you move into 7 Tesla becoming more clinically available. You're looking at that 3T market as well, which could open up more avenue. Do you want to unpack a little bit more about the no investment required and how that actually practically works?
Well, it's quite different to most of the other MedTech companies that we worked with. And the kind of key question is, why is it so different? Well, the first one here, it's a great product, and obviously Shahjahan's got the personal reputation there. Most MedTech startup companies would say something along these lines. It's a great product and I'm an expert in my field. So that's not that unusual, I suppose. We were kind of signed up as the commercialization partner for the Strength in Places Fund. And that's been great for us. I think it's been good for the project as well. And that we get kind of first dibs on each of the coils that are developed, and so far so good. Long may that last. We sell to a large international medical research market. It's a specialist sale to known researchers. There's about 110 sites in the world that have got these 7T scanners. There's 7 in the UK. But many of the companies that we've worked for in the past, they go for the big scale-up plan. They go for the big home run, which requires big investment, big sales infrastructure. And to get the best salesman, you've got to pay big bucks to get them. It's a big gamble. One of the companies we worked for, the business plan was to get the product into a kind of major retailer, and we got it into major retailers in Canada and Boots in the UK. And you think that's great. That's a dead cert. That's there's no better place to sell your new product than Boots. This isn't this isn't head coils, obviously.
No, head coils will not be available at your local Boots anytime
No,
soon,
but-
just to manage that expectation.
But yeah, but Boots, they require thousands of products to fill. They run expensive promotions to launch a new product in their stores. They need extra products in inventory in their sales warehouses. They take between 60 and 70% margin of that, which then drives the price up, which then reduces the market size a bit. And they charge for all the point of sale materials. At the time I dealt with them, they would pay the company, the small company, 3 months after at the end of the month when they made the sale. So from a cash flow point of view, that's an absolute disaster. You're putting all your money into manufacturing and into inventory, and into sales and the cost of sales and all the point of sale material, and you're not getting paid for 3 months afterwards. So, that's you can't do that without serious investment. And all I'm saying is that if there's another way to do it, then you should consider that before you go down that route.
And again, understanding that it's not the right path for every product, and some products require that pathway, but looking at the market and understanding how you can hit different aspects of that, there are other routes to it if your product lends itself to that.
Yeah, and for us, at the moment, we don't need a CE mark or a FDA approval. We obviously do all the safety stuff, but the responsibility for that is with the researchers, depending on how they're going to use the head coil. So, if you can sell to researchers, then that's a great alternative route. If you can sell for animal use, that's another. Not every product, but it kind of has less regulatory hurdles. It also generates a load of data that you can then use for your own certification at a later date, perhaps. And the other thing that a lot of companies do is they'll reduce the claims about the use of the device. So it moves it into a lower category of medical device. Can't always do that, but some people can do that. They then gather data on the safety and effectiveness of it, and then at a later date they can make the claims about the product and move it into a higher classification when they can afford to do it.
Yeah.
So
I suppose at the start of the journey, understanding if you can take that step wedge approach to the market and which markets you can hit on the route. So if your end goal is clinical adoption, that's great, but is there a step wedge where you can get there? Like you see, where you can commercialise and bring in income as you get to that step and build your every generation. But unfortunately for some products, that won't be the case. There won't be an academic base for it, and there won't be potentially animal use, but it's a good exercise to do.
Yes.
I suppose is what you're saying at the start of that process, to understand your options.
Kind of go into it with your eyes open. And also from the point of view of the investors, they don't want to be putting their money into a company that will take 10, 15 years to pay them back. They'll typically look for a return within 3 or 4 years. So, they're expecting to back 10 companies, of which one will succeed spectacularly and a couple will plod along and the rest will fail. So, but they're not looking mega long term. They'll be looking for kind of short to medium term returns, and that in a way kind of forces you into the kind of big bang, ramp up as soon as we possibly can, and that's what generates the extra risk.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's the different output for each company, I suppose. But yeah, I would say consider all the options before you just go blindly into what's expected of you. So,
yeah, it would be interesting as well. So you've obviously partnered with the Living Lab. It has been a fantastic project that is still ongoing. We've still got work to do on that whole commercialisation plan, but I'd say on the whole.
Yeah, we've just moved into a bigger space. So I think we've moved twice now, and each time we've doubled in space.
So within the clinical innovation zones ecosystem,
that's
being
right.
able to
We've still got access to the scanner on the ground floor, and that works really well for us. Yeah.
I suppose that's one of the key things that you've hit on, that the clinical innovation zone is part of your setup and is part of this model for no investment required, is that they've taken away some of those other strains that come when you want to start up your own company and have your own premises, because it's not just your brain capacity thinking about fire routes, fire extinguishers, the companies to do the mousetraps, all of that extra stuff that when you start a medtech company, it's not the first thing that comes to your mind that you're going to have to be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. But then also, so there's that aspect of it, but then also that proximity to the hospital, to patients, to clinicians, and to the scanner, which, for your project specifically, is vital.
There's other companies that will do serviced office accommodation, WeWork and companies like that, but I know they charge quite a lot as well. But you don't have that benefit of the expertise in that area as well. And generally, if you're signing up to a lease on a building, you'll be looking at 5-10 year leases, and for a small startup company, that's a big commitment.
It's not always sustainable, and like you say, with those routes sometimes that you have to go down, that's quite a financial gamble as well.
That's it.
And just in terms of the Live and Lab partnership, is there any kind of key take homes there in terms of what that's contributed to the kind of commercialisation side, in terms of what you've been able to benefit from partnering with ourselves?
It's just as you said before, it's the access to the scanner and the clinicians to generate the images. The photo I showed earlier of a head coil in a scanner, for us to do that as an external company, even that would have been a big deal. But to have a publicity material, case study material, examples of brain images, access to patients, to volunteers rather, in our case, then that's a big part of the marketing and the success of the company. Haven't done it yet, but when we grow a bit, then we'll expect to bring customers here, demonstrate the head coil and the machine downstairs, I hope, and long may it last.
And again, a fantastic project for us to be able to show all of the things that can be done in terms of medtech innovations with yourself as that kind of key exemplar as to how that has worked, and the strengths that we've been able to highlight through that as well. And I suppose something else that people will be interested in, we've just chatted about how product launches can be very, very expensive, and I suppose some surprise as to the amount of investment it would take to get into some major retail chains there. But you guys have partnered with companies to help with the aspect of marketing and distribution. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about that kind of partnership and how that's worked?
Yeah, well, we've got a few things that have worked out well for us. First of all our products are made to order. All right, so we don't have an inventory of head coils, which means we're not sitting on millions of dollars of stock or anything like that. So they're all made to order, and then when somebody does order, the payment terms are third up front, third when we ship, and a third when they're happy, which means that we're kind of cash flow positive from the start. But we kind of, I think more than 2 years ago now, we signed a collaboration agreement, or a cooperation agreement, I think we call it, with Scope. You won't know them, but they're a company, there we go, company who also make accessories for MRI scanners. Very different to ours. We'll not go into the details of that, that's another topic. But so the point is that they make accessories for the same customers as ours, and they've got a sales infrastructure in Europe and the US, and now in China as well, where they're selling their product into these markets. And we've got a version of our product that includes their accessory inside our product, so they can now sell our product with theirs to all their markets. So basically, we're able to sell our product through their sales channels, and they're able to sell their products through our product as well. So it really is a win-win for both. And we've got a technical collaboration with the scanner manufacturers as well, where we get a lot of data on how to interface to them, and that helps build our credibility with the scanner manufacturers, and it gets some referrals from them.
Yeah, that sounds like, again, another fantastic opportunity. And again, just that horizon scanning of understanding that market and understanding what else is out there. So instead of Scope being a competitor to you, how you work together to really enhance that. And that sounds absolutely fantastic and a really great way to do that. And I think that takes us on to just some of your launch of materials, which have been quite exciting. So it's kind of been a bit of a global launch in terms of the ways of launching products.
Yeah, well, the kind of deal that we signed with Scope, who are part of the Canon Group, it should say it's an unusual one because Canon are not manufacturers of 7T scanners, so it's not like it's competing with Siemens, GE, and Philips. So they're distributing it to Siemens, GE, and Philips customers on our behalf. So that then got us onto the Canon stand to launch the product with the Scope probes on it, which we could, as a small company, never afforded to do. So I think the photo on the left was the launch in Toronto a couple of years ago. The one in the middle was at the major MRI conference in Singapore last year, and I think the one on the right is on the Siemens stand at Singapore last year as well. So we're getting the word out there. We've only done 10 so far. We'll probably do another 10 this year, and once we get CE marking, it should only go up from there.
Yeah, that's absolutely fabulous. And again,
and I say to do all that with no external fundraising has been a breath of fresh air for me compared to the other companies that I've seen. It means that there's no legals, there's no legal fees for all these fundraising things. There's no investment director fees. There's no constraints. You've got the freedom to do whatever we want. If we want to invest in a new piece of equipment, we'll do that. If we want to take on staff, we'll do it. And we basically match our capacity for production to the demand that we've got. So that keeps us a low overhead rate. And being in the clinical innovation zone, that keeps our in-house overhead rates really low as well. So we can match our size to the demand for our products.
Yeah, I was going to say, so it seems like the clinical innovation zone and the ecosystem through the University of Glasgow is really giving you that ability to be flexible. And it really suits your product and your model and your business kind of process that you guys have chosen to adopt. And then, again, working with the Living Lab, having those set out routes to commercialisation has also been an asset. And like I say, I can see how the Living Lab programme and the services and different assets that we've developed through the Living Lab could really support that for yourselves and for other companies going forward. So I think one of my last questions in the last few minutes that we've got remaining would be, if we had to summarise a few bullet points for anyone out there who's looking at MedTech startup, what would be your key home messages for them in terms of their setup and getting the ball rolling?
Okay. Well, if you can start off small, which I'm sure all companies do start off small, and don't take on any debt. Do as much as you can with grants, and explore all the potential routes to market, or at least low-cost routes to market, whether that's selling to researchers or animal routes or whatever. And if you do have to go down the kind of VC angel investors route, then choose them carefully and be clear about what they're doing or not doing and what freedoms you've got with it. And then once you get started, is just keep control of your costs. Keep your overheads low. And you're never quite out the woods. You always have to have a reserve fund to see you through the hard times. We had a couple of orders held up, shall we say, by the US the last few weeks. And and didn't know what was going to happen to them, given that we've ordered all the parts for them. And we were worried for a wee while, but because we got paid up front for them, that wasn't such a big deal.
Yeah.
But in terms of loss of income, it was a potential hit. But luckily, the Trump government then released the funds, and the two projects were then to continue. So you never know what's around the corner. So keep something in reserve.
Sigh of relief.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's absolutely fantastic, and I hope for everyone that's been really informative at looking at that different model.
Yeah.
And what I'd say to anyone who's listening today who's potentially interested in that model, or any of the offerings through the Clinical Innovation Zone or through the collaborations with the Living Lab, please reach out to us. You can find contact information on the website, or if people just want to hear more about us generally, we've got a newsletter that you can sign up to again on the website, or you can follow us on the different social channels. So please feel free to reach out, and if it's questions round about today's presentation or anything else that you maybe want to ask Russell in more detail, please reach out to us as well, and we can make sure those questions get answered.
Gonna run out of time for questions, have we?
Yeah, we have. But hopefully we've given people a really good flavour of that model, and like say the ways that model has been supported through this ecosystem, the Clinical Innovation Zone and the Living Lab, but also ways that we could potentially support if you have to go down that other more traditional model that Russell talked about as well. Feel free to reach out about that, because there's definitely avenues of support through this ecosystem for that as well. Which just leaves me to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. It's been great to have you all on the webinar. A massive thank you to Russell for sharing his experiences. It's been absolutely great, and I hope everyone has a lovely afternoon.